So Doom: The Dark Ages has finally got a release date. May the 15th, we're back at slaying demons much sooner than I thought. I'd heard rumours about it, but I'm glad that's been confirmed. And honestly, I just can't wait to play it. There's obviously a lot more information that's been shown online since the reveal of a couple of days ago, showing much more in-depth gameplay and a slightly more kind of look into the mechanics, the kind of environments, and what you can expect in terms of the combat loop. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So since the reboot of the Doom series in 2016, there's been a big emphasis from id at creating a combat loop that's engaging, and even though 2016 didn't really have something like that at its core, or something as precise as a combat loop, it was still incredibly fun and brought an element of having to think on your feet and to approach resource management while slaying demons. But it wasn't really until Doom Eternal came along where that really got tightened up. They created a combat loop that was not only engaging but incredibly addictive and responsive. I personally couldn't get enough of it and can't get enough of it. Even though there were quite a lot of things that you sometimes had to juggle at the same time, you didn't have to use all of those things if you didn't want to. But it just allowed you to really get into a zone of almost tranquility while doing all these things in different ways to get what you needed to from the combat. So in Doom: The Dark Ages, what we're being shown, or what we've been shown on the recent footage, is definitely an emphasis on using the shield saw. The shield saw is your main, almost mainstay throughout combat. Yeah, I think it kind of replaces basically your chainsaw, but it gives you more options than simply bringing it out to get ammo. As we've seen from the footage, there's still ammo pickups, health pickups, armor pickups, and they have the usual color to them. So health is blue, armor is green, and ammo is yellow. But they're all much more muted as well, so similar to Doom 2016. So I hope they keep that kind of color palette. It's something that I personally find much more aesthetically pleasing. But what you can definitely see in the combat loop is that depending on what type of damage you do to the demons, you get certain type of resources back. It's not fully consistent in the footage that I've seen, as in it's hard to tell whether something consistently always gives you something back, but there have been cases in which you see the shield saw flying out and you get some armor back, or if you finish a demon in a certain way, you'll get some health, you'll get some ammo as well. So I think there's lots of different ways, again, in which to manage the resources while being in combat and creating like an all new experience and combat loop. The thing that stood out to me was the new prompts now available to the player. So id have always been very good at transmitting information to the player in terms of audio cues and visual cues, and Doom: The Dark Ages is no different. So I noticed 3 specific kind of coloured circles that appear around enemies. So there's the kind of yellow circle, there's a green circle, there's a purple circle. So I believe that the yellow circle is to show you when an enemy is stunned. The green circle appears when you carry out a parry correctly, or you deflect an enemy's projectile. So when an enemy's attack flashes green, that means you can use your shield saw to either parry or deflect, depending on what type of attack it is. And the purple circle, as you probably would have guessed, is what replaces the kind of glory kill prompt. And as I mentioned in a previous video, glory kills have been completely revamped for Doom: The Dark Ages. Now you've got complete flexibility over how to actually destroy enemies, which I think is really, really cool. Out of the new kind of things that we've seen that I just mentioned, the thing I'm excited about the most is the parrying. I think is that kind of mechanic which could be really satisfying to use and really satisfying to master. I think it'll be something optional, so I don't think you have to do it, but I think you'll be rewarded for using it. And it'll be interesting to see if they bring in a certain type of enemy at some point, like they did with the Marauder, that maybe does require parrying to be able to defeat it. But I think most of the time it'll be there as an extra thing that you can use if you want to, but not necessarily something that's obligatory. But I'm really looking forward to trying that. Another thing that was really interesting to see was the fact that on the HUD in the center of the screen and kind of towards the bottom, there was like 3 drops that look like drops of water, and also an image of a fist. And that seems to show you that you've got available to you 3 melee attacks, because each time that Doom guy was carrying out a melee attack, one of those drops would kind of disappear. But then they would come back on some kind of cooldown. So obviously there's a system there to bear in mind, which I think is really, really interesting. I'm not really sure what the cooldown or charge is of the shield saw. Sometimes you can see the icon in the bottom left kind of glowing under certain conditions, but I'm not really sure how that fully works yet. But it's something that we'll get used to soon enough. But I'm really looking forward to being able to throw the shield saw into an enemy, let it rotate into its skin while you're still shooting. That looks awesome. Another thing that's really interesting for me is how they showcased a little bit of the kind of sandbox element of the game. So it's not an open world game, and even though I personally would not be against that at all, I absolutely love open world games, and an open world Doom game would be incredible. But this is obviously the closest that we'll get to anything like that. So the sandbox element sounded really cool. It almost sounded like you could maybe go outside of like a mission area and kind of explore kind of wasteland and just go into different kind of combat scenarios with enemies, kind of explore, find some loot, and then return and maybe carry on the story. So I'd love it if they created some kind of procedurally generated content where maybe it meant that if you kept on exploring different sections, you'll encounter different things each time you do so in slightly different ways. So it would add like an element of replayability, and where exploration is really unique every time, and you kind of rewarded slightly differently for it also. I personally would love that, and I love that they've included that to it, kind of something more vast and bigger. They're obviously pushing the boundaries of what a Doom game actually is. And as with any new entry, there's obviously new characters that we'll interact with. They looked really well done. It looked to me like there was maybe a young Hell Priest, some kind of returning characters from Doom Eternal. But I'm really interested to see how they tell the story, and it's not going to be through codex entries they mentioned, it's all going to be through the cinematics, so they're probably going to be much more detailed, longer, probably much more narrative around them. So yeah, really looking forward to trying out the game. It's going to be a grounded, stand and fight game with a melee system that looks really awesome, parrying that I can't wait to try, lots of new weapons, huge open areas, lots of enemies. Can't wait. Hope you're excited too. Thanks guys.